Picture the scene. A gigantic desert, sand everywhere, brain-melting heat, and out of nowhere, over 2 million people camped out. It's like taking the entire population of a massive city, throwing them in the middle of the Sahara with no supermarket, no delivery apps, not even a corner bakery. That food stash they brought for the trip? Gone. Scraped the bottom of the barrel. The panic hit hard. Imagine everyone running around, pulling their hair out, wondering if they could make a stew out of their sandal soles. The math was simple and desperate. There were millions of mouths to feed, and absolutely zero food on the horizon. But then, right when the despair was hitting the ceiling, happens what is maybe the most absurd, hilarious, and surreal logistics event in all of human history. The solution didn't come from a lost caravan of merchants. The food simply started falling from the sky. Literally, it rained food on the camp. Seriously, try to visualize the insanity of this situation. People wake up at dawn, step out of their tents rubbing the sleep out of their eyes, and find the entire desert floor covered in this weird, white stuff. It looked like a fine frost, except they were in the middle of one of the hottest places on the planet. This is the famous Manna. Almost everyone has heard this story somewhere, but the big question nobody stops to ask is this: what did this stuff actually taste like? If you're lost in a desert starving to death, any stale cracker tasting like styrofoam is a banquet, right? But the records say otherwise. The texture, the look, and the flavor of this impossible food are described with so many details it would make any Michelin-starred chef scratch their head even today. And there's more. It wasn't just grab and eat. It was a war operation, a crazy logistical nightmare to harvest this stuff before the sun came up over the horizon and simply melted your breakfast away. Today, we're taking a time machine, stepping into this makeshift kitchen in the middle of the desert and finding out the texture, the exact flavor, and the insane routine to harvest the manna. Forget that classic image of a French baguette falling straight from a cloud into someone's hand. What was on their menu was something much more bizarre. To understand this ancient cuisine, first we need to look at the original records, as if they were the oldest restaurant review on the planet. Back in the book of Exodus, chapter 16, people wrote down exactly what the dish looked like. Imagine the mental gymnastics of these guys trying to explain to future generations what that was. They said the manna was pure white and looked a lot like coriander seeds. Whoa, hold on. If you're one of those people who hates cilantro and you're already making a disgusted face, you can relax. The comparison with coriander was purely and simply about the shape and size. It didn't taste like fish seasoning, no. They were little balls, tiny round flakes covering the sand. A texture that resembled a shiny resin, almost like sweet crystals scattered on the ground. But if the physical look was already weird, just wait until you find out the exact flavor that exploded in the mouths of these starving people. Because the description they left behind is mouth-watering, and it involved an ingredient no one ever expected to find there. So hold on to this. The ancient book states crystal clear that the taste of this thing fell roughly into the category of a honey cake. Or, depending on which translator you ask, a very thin biscuit, like a wafer, bursting with sweetness. Stop and think about the brilliant irony here. These people are in the middle of a brutal desert, where the standard survival menu would be dried lizard, scorpion stew, or some root that tastes like dirt and despair. But no, the delicacy keeping everyone alive was essentially a sugar-packed premium carbohydrate, a bakery falling from the sky every single day. They needed explosive energy to walk for miles under a sun that fried even your thoughts, and their diet basically became a mountain of honey biscuits falling for free right on their doorstep. But if you think it was just waking up around noon, stretching, opening the tent flap and filling a bucket with free breakfast, you didn't pay attention to the catch of the story. The manna came with operational rules that would make any modern logistics manager cry in the bathroom and quit. The golden rule was very simple, but totally ruthless. You had to harvest it before the sun really got hot. The physics of this food was an absurdity on its own. When the sun finally rose, breaking the dawn, and the desert heat started hitting the sand hard, everything that hadn't been harvested simply melted, evaporated, vanished like ice left on hot asphalt. This forced an entire nation, over 2 million people, to drastically change their biological clocks. Men, women, and the elderly had to jump out of bed in the pitch black. It was a frantic marathon, a daily race against the sun, with everyone picking up the white flakes off the ground before their breakfast turned into a puddle of sugar water and disappeared into the sand. And then came the second rule, which was an idiot-proof test for greedy people. The daily quota was strictly calculated, the equivalent of about 2 liters per person. You couldn't play the wise guy. You know those people who go to an all-you-can-eat buffet and try to hide cheese bread in napkins to take home? Yeah, if anyone tried to hoard manna out of fear of starving the next day, the biological punishment was disgusting and instant. The record says that any leftovers kept from one day to the next didn't just go bad, they violently rotted, bred massive worms, and reeked of radioactive trash that woke up the entire camp. The food's expiration date was exactly 24 hours, period. The only exception that broke the laws of physics happened on the eve of the sacred day of rest. On that specific day, mysteriously, the food did not go bad, didn't stink, and no worms showed up to ruin the feast. It was a fail-proof system and a hoarder-proof system. Every day was an exercise in trust mixed with the cruelest alarm clock known to humanity. If you overslept, you spent the rest of the day with your stomach growling, watching your neighbor chew on that crunchy honey biscuit. Imagine the despair of the guy who always had the habit of saving leftover dinner for the next day's lunch. In the desert, with manna, that was a recipe for a biological disaster right inside his own tent. The rule was clear and left no room for negotiation. You take what you'll eat today, and that's it. But human beings are stubborn by nature, right? There's always that smart aleck who thinks it's better to secure tomorrow's meal, just in case the sky forgets to send the shipment. Well, the punishment for the folks who tried to run a clandestine stash under their beds was nasty and immediate. Historical records say that any leftover manna saved for the next day didn't just get hard or a bit stale. The thing violently rotted. It spawned worms the size of fingers, swarming in the middle of that mass that just a day before was sweet and perfect. And the smell? A stench of radioactive garbage under the midday sun that immediately snitched on whoever tried to cheat the system. It was a food with a shelf life locked at exactly 24 hours. The universe set up a fast food scheme where quality control was done by nature itself. All this madness created a mind-blowing routine. The lives of more than 2 million people turned into an unforgiving Swiss watch. You wake up in the dark, run out into the desert cold, pick up the little balls tasting like honey cake off the ground, and run back to the tent. If you slept in and the sun hit the sand, your breakfast melted right in front of you. And then, my friend, it was spending the entire day with your stomach glued to your back, watching your neighbors savor that crunchy biscuit. And of course, after the initial shock that food was falling from the sky, human culinary instincts kicked in. The crowd wasn't going to eat the little balls raw for the rest of their lives. The texts say they took this manna, threw it into mortars, ground it down into a fine flour, and then creativity ran wild. They cooked it in pots, making a kind of sweet porridge. They baked it in makeshift ovens to turn it into breads or warm cookies. The smell of baking cake invaded the camp of millions of people in the middle of a barren desert. Imagine the absurd scene of campfires burning as far as the eye can see, frying, baking, and boiling the exact same raw material that had just fallen from the clouds. But the level of bizarre and the breaking of the laws of physics reaches its peak when we talk about the 6th day of the week. Because if the rule was that the manna rotted if saved, on the day before the sacred day of rest, the game changed completely. The instruction was to harvest double, and then the impossible happened again. That same food that bred worms on any other day magically stayed fresh, crunchy, and sweet for 48 hours straight. It was a survival school where discipline was rewarded with the taste of honey, and disobedience was punished with a pot full of stinking maggots. But no matter how much they tried to vary the recipe, the base was always the same. And that is exactly where the human mind starts to enter a dangerous meltdown. But think about it. No matter how much you try to get fancy in your makeshift kitchen, grinding it, baking it, boiling it, making pancakes or porridge, the base of your diet is still exactly the same. And it's at this point in the story that biology gives way to a complete psychological meltdown. Because we, human beings, simply weren't programmed to eat the same thing every single day for the rest of our lives. Picture the scene. A stick figure sitting on the sand, staring at a plate of honey cake for the 1000th consecutive day. 1 year eating this, 2 years, 10 years, 20 years. And the historical record says they spent 40 years wandering in that endless desert. 40 years eating lunch, dinner, and breakfast with the exact same texture, the same smell, and the same extremely sweet taste. The human mind simply cannot handle absolute boredom. And it didn't take long for the bomb to go off. Over in the book of Numbers, chapter 11, the entire camp enters a sort of gastronomic mutiny. The crowd just freaks out. The text says they were crying at the doors of their tents, screaming at the top of their lungs at the leadership that they couldn't stand looking at the face of that manna anymore. They reached the absurd point of feeling nostalgic about the time they were whipped slaves in Egypt. That's exactly what you heard. The culinary despair was so massive that they cried missing the fish they ate for free back then. They cried missing the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. They desperately wanted anything that tasted salty, sour, or bitter, just to break the maddening torture of that infinite sweetness falling from the sky. The daily miracle that saved 2 million people from certain death by starvation ended up turning into the biggest and longest mental sanity test in the entire history of the ancient world. Boredom became their greatest villain. But everything bizarre and surreal comes to an end, and the end of the Manna era was as abrupt and shocking as its beginning. 4 decades of walking later, the survivors of that generation finally stepped out of the desert. They crossed the border and entered the famous promised land of Canaan. They stepped on green grass for the very first time. And it was there, on the exact day they ate the first grain planted in solid ground, at the exact moment they tasted the first normal food in 40 years, that the sky simply turned off the tap. The manna stopped falling the next morning. Not a single white seed was ever seen on the ground again. The delivery was canceled forever and ever. The impossible food fulfilled its logistical purpose and disappeared from the face of the earth, leaving behind only records and a giant mystery. It was never meant to be an eternal menu for a fancy restaurant, but rather the most surreal emergency bridge between death in the desert and a new beginning for humanity. And the question that keeps hammering in your head today is this: how long would you last eating your favorite dish every single day, for every meal, before you started crying remembering the taste of a simple, raw onion? If this deep dive into the crazy logistics of antiquity blew your mind and made you laugh a little, drop a like down below and subscribe to the channel right now. YouTube loves to hide good content, but you are much smarter than the algorithm. And if you think the story of desert food is bizarre, click on the video showing up on your screen right now, where I explain what was the most ridiculous and brilliant war tactic the ancient world has ever seen. I'll see you there, and don't forget the popcorn.